Ready to hit the pause button on your parenting fails? Ready to feel better about your parenting? Welcome to the Parenting Pause podcast, where all of you is welcome and where you can listen in on how other parents became the parent they always dreamed of being. I'm Leslie Potter, a mother, a parenting coach, and a fellow traveler on this journey to wake up in our parenting. And I believe together we can make this a better world for ourselves and our kiddos. Hello, loves. Welcome to the Parenting Paused podcast. And I am so thrilled to have you here today. It's a rare event to have a couple on. So I'm very excited to be able to speak with you and share your journey.
Great. Well,
we're happy to be here too.
Yeah. Well, I would like to start today. I'm asking everybody at the beginning to tell me a little bit about what was going on for you in your home and what you tried before that wasn't exactly working that kind of sent you my way.
Well, I'll start. So we have 3 daughters. Currently, they are 30, 27, and 20.
How did that happen?
I know, wow. When we connected with you, Leslie, let's see, our middle daughter was, I'm trying to even remember, I think she was about 23 at that point. So we had been on quite a journey with our girls. Our middle daughter, Alma, really had a lot of struggles starting from a young age. 7, she was diagnosed by a practitioner as being clinically depressed. She really had a lot of ups and downs, and by the time she was 16, she was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. And at that point, we involved pretty traditional, standard psychiatrists and psychologists. And I will say I had a lot of faith in them, and I really believed that we finally had this diagnosis, and it explained a lot of difficult behavior. And now that we had the diagnosis and the doctors, we were going to, she was going to be cured. She's going to get on medication, and that would just solve it.
She'd start to behave, right?
Yeah, she'd start to behave in a way that was comfortable and stop being so extreme and, and succeed in school and feel good about herself. And so around not too long after that diagnosis, maybe a year and a half later, our oldest daughter also had a major medical problem. She had an autoimmune attack on her nervous system that left her with peripheral neuropathy. She was just 18, 3 weeks before this happened. She had just started college. And the long, sad, difficult story of that condition was that she ended up also with very severe clinical depression, like at home, in bed, for a year being depressed. So we had these 2 tandem situations going on. And I know for myself, as the mom, I felt like it was my job to get them fixed. Mm-hmm. That, these were terrible problems that were derailing their lives and our lives as a family. And they really needed to get fixed. They had a problem, and I was going to apply all my rather prodigious determination to get them hooked up with the right medical people and fix them.
And how did that work for you?
Right. Well, there was some ups and downs. There were some positive things happened, but by the time we found our way to you when our middle daughter was 23, so remember 16 to 23, it's a long time, and there was struggle before that. We were really struggling we'd done a lot of intervention. They had both been in wilderness treatment programs. They had both been in residential treatment programs. And each time we'd enter into one of those, I would always think, oh, this is great. This is going to fix it. This will be we are going to end up in nirvana on the other side of this.
Right.
And it didn't work out that way. And so by the time we got in touch with you, we were in a lot of struggle with Alma about her going back to college. She was getting started at community college. She was living in Colorado. because that's where her residential treatment program was. And she was getting a lot of F's and D's. And we were trying to set up some sort of transactional agreement that, if she got A's and B's, we would pay for her rent and room and board and all that. But if she didn't, we weren't going to. And we were really struggling with how difficult that was. I remember Brian called it the nuclear option, that, we would have to cut her off, and that felt terrible. But we also felt terrible. It just felt like we weren't supporting what we wanted to support. And we were very kind of rigid and pitted against her, I felt myself. I mean, maybe Brian should chime in and give some of his experience.
Yeah. How was that for you, Brian?
The whole process was very challenging. I kind of look at the phases that we went through as, before we met you, Leslie, we're struggling with some very difficult circumstances. The two older girls both had near-death experiences, and because of their health problems, and that's stressful. At least it was stressful to me as a parent. And I view the episodes that went before we met you were kind of like the MASH hospital, where let's just get back from the brink of death. And then meeting you has helped us go from that point to having a healthy family. And both were very useful steps. And so there was a time, I think that, both the older girls went through wilderness therapy, as Tracy indicated, and I think that was a very positive thing for both of them. And then they both went through, residential treatment programs after wilderness, and I think that there was mixed results there. I think for Kate, our oldest, it was very positive. For Alma, our middle daughter, I think it was much more mixed. I think there was both benefit and harm during that period. But the real game changer for me was, Tracy was just talking a lot about how, the child has an illness, and we're all in our culture raised, okay, there's an illness, that's a bad thing, let's fix it. That's the focus of attention, whether it's through pills or talk therapy or whatever it might be. And the kind of gestalt change that happened when we started working with you was the recognition that, we'd done some thinking about this beforehand, but it really got to be spiritual practice of the patient is the family. And that, we'd been introduced to that concept by some of the professionals that we dealt with before we met you, but it was you, I think, that really helped bring that to daily practice. And that's made, I would say, that's one of two huge things that I've learned through working with you. And the other being the thing they tell you on the airplane, which is put on your own oxygen mask first. And I had to learn to do that, to learn the lesson that, I'm no good, and in fact, I'm probably doing harm if I don't take care of myself first. And if I do that, two good things come out of it. And one is that I'm in a much better condition to provide the kind of love and support that's going to be constructive to whatever the situation is. And the other is, just at the same time, I'm modeling a kind of behavior that my daughters can see and say, hey, maybe I'll take care of myself too. Those, I think, are the real changes in worldview that have come to me from the years that we've been working together.
Well, I remember a time, I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking back myself about when you first came, and, I like to support parents in knowing that, you both worked extremely hard once we began to shift the attention back to what was going on for you, that you had both been kind of the holder of your girl's life force. That's how we kind of describe it. And this wasn't just like, okay, yeah, just cut them off or don't do this, right? Because emotionally, they were extremely dependent on you for their life force. And I think this happens to many of us. We think we're helping our children in a way, but somehow we disable them. I know I have in my parenting, right? And so I think a long part of the process for us, it took a couple of years for you both to be able to, I remember a moment, Brian, when you got the word curiosity. That was so exciting for you. When we began to move you back more into a curiosity of your part in the dynamic than of your child's, because the complaint was always, we want them to grow up. We want them to grow up, right? We want them to be on their own. And we began to flesh out that maybe that wasn't totally the whole truth. That on an emotional level, that you both were more used to them being dependent. So we began to work your process internally around what it was like to be able to start to separate with your daughters. Yes, maybe you could speak about that a little bit, Tracy.
Yeah, I remember during the early times before we were working with you, and people would say things to me like, I hope you're taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. And I used to get so angry when people said that, because I would think, what do you mean? You know, I'm trying to take care of my kid. And I don't even think they didn't mean it the way that I've come to know that. And I found it very annoying that people would say that to me. It felt to me like they were trying to make themselves feel better. Like if I was stressed, that made them feel uncomfortable, and they wanted me to feel better, so they could feel better.
Go get a massage, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's been I really think of it as a spiritual practice and a very much ongoing practice of turning inward to focus on what's happening inside me and taking care of that so that I can regulate myself and come and be alongside and in relationship with my children, or even with Brian or anybody else I'm with, in a way where I'm not approaching them out of a reaction, and instead from a more regulated place, because I've been able to attend to whatever's rising up for me. And that is a revelation, because it took me a long time to unravel that feeling of the child is the problem, the child is creating a problem, the child is the one that needs to change.
So we often talk in this work about that, we organize our life around not feeling certain feelings. And what you're describing is, you being the good mother, you being the fixer, you taking care of everyone was kind of your attempt, it sounds like, to organize your life, not to feel what? Could you share that a little bit with us?
I didn't want to feel powerless, I think.
What was that it was reminding me of is one of the things I've learned in this process is that when I'm either angry or fearful, I am much less helpful to those around me.
Right.
And conversely, when I'm being helpful, that's when I'm feeling good. And so the curiosity that you mentioned, Leslie, it was very much a learned thing for me through the process of working together, of when I feel anger or fear, hit the pause button and be genuinely curious. Why am I feeling anger or fear right now? And, work my way through that till I get back to sort of a place where I'm saying, okay, I feel good. And then I can be helpful, which is what enriches my life. So it's those concepts all kind of are intertwined for me. The curiosity, noticing the anger or fear instead of letting it take over me. And one of the ways I put it sometimes is whenever I'm have any anger or fear, I can feel my IQ plummet.
Mm-hmm.
I just
your emotional IQ, right?
Both of them.
Right,
both
right.
My emotional and my intellectual IQ just plummet.
Right.
And so the work has taught me pay attention to that, be curious about it, and figure it out. Because you don't want to make any big decisions. You don't want to be working on your connection with whatever loved one, other person that you're trying to build connection with, when you are, at least when I am, feeling anger or fear. So need to hit the pause button and figure it out. before I do anything else.
Well, you're talking about the safe seat process, that we work in this process a lot when you actually turn toward the distress in you. And I like to tell parents, when we're in an emotional state of dysregulation, all the child in us needs to hear is, I love you, I hear you, and thank you for being here, right?
Yeah.
And I hear that's what you do. When you're able to, this is your adult function that's able to say, okay, I'm going to self-discipline myself not to act out of those feelings of anger and fear. And so then the work becomes, as Tracy said, to turn back in, to attend to the one inside who feels anger and fear, and to validate that one, right? Not to get rid of it or to repress it, but not to let that one act out in the relationship with your child.
And it's amazing, once you do notice and make that turn that you're talking about,
yes,
the process is actually pretty straightforward usually. In fact, there's a famous line from Death of a Salesman, attention must be paid. And the act of attending to it, I find at least 50% of the time, that's it. That solved the problem right there. Like, I gave myself enough love right there. I'm actually not feeling fearful anymore, or angry, or whatever it was. Sometimes it's more work than that. We have to say, oh, gee, where did that come from? But sometimes it's just the act of pausing and saying, I got you.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's taking the time to grow yourself back up into the present moment, so you can actually show up as an adult. Where often when we're in our anger, our fear, our powerlessness, our feelings of rejection, our only strategies are coming from our young self, right? And so when you pause and you turn that love toward you, instead of, we think we're turning our love toward our children when we're trying to fix them, but they don't experience it that way, right? So when we just take that love and we turn it, like you said, Brian, back toward ourselves, and pause and just sit in that deep love of our own being, then my experience is I grow back up into an adult and can actually show up and see what my daughter's needing. Is she able to take in my love, right, in the form that I'm offering it?
I think another piece for me is that was a big shift, was instead of putting my focus on fixing them, or if you want to say it in a nicer way, giving them what they need or helping them. That was my big focus. How can I help them?
Right.
And instead, I made the connection with them primary.
Yes.
And how can I keep my connection with them open and flowing, and where we're both giving and receiving? And because when I was just about helping or fixing them, that's where we would get blocked. And I would lose out on some pretty amazing moments and experiences with them that really grew me, because I thought I kind of knew the answers.
Well, you were dependent on them to receive your help, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I've had experiences that have expanded me by making, instead of me being a helper primary, making my connection with them, keeping that connection open primary. That's my primary goal, is to stay connected.
Well, I know you're in my parenting of teens group, Tracy, who I think we've been together many years now.
In fact, we're now all parenting young adults.
Exactly, right?
We started out, yeah.
Yes, but we've been talking about often, my teacher, Bruce, that says, are you willing to give up the fantasy that you can help anyone, right?
Yeah.
And that's been so huge for us, because how people can misinterpret that is to say, well, then just forget it, you're on your own. And what you're describing here, which is so beautiful, is I still must be of service. I still offer, but it's not my job to try to force my child to take what I'm giving, right? It's my job to offer, then to attune. You're talking about the connection, which I offer, and I see that they roll their eyes, or they slam the door, or they say, I don't want it. And then if we can attune to, actually, my offering might not have hit the mark, right?
Yeah.
And if I really want to meet that connection, I'm willing to shift my own self instead of trying to force them to take the offering.
I will now respond because they, even at age 30, they still come to me with a kind of a emotional dump of whatever is happening. And I've gotten better about saying, what are you looking for from me? Are you looking for commiseration, consolation, or problem solving? Because I can do any of those. My place that I really love is problem solving. If they want consolation, commiseration, that's more of a practice for me to hang with that.
But look how that's an act of care. You were just saying, how can we be loving to ourselves? I'm not going to set myself up to give something that's always going to be rejected, right?
Yeah.
And so then I'd have to blame the rejector. I blame my kids. They never want what I want. They won't let me help them, right? So that's a beautiful example of self-care there. Yes, that's my leading edge. I'm really good at that. But when I ask, then I can actually offer something that is connecting, even when it's challenging for me, as you say, the commiseration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you here. What would you both say was the main belief that you feel you had to surrender to parent this way? Like the parenting belief that you had to surrender or give up?
I don't know if I would call it giving. I think it more in positive terms. I mean, I've given up a lot of failed notions of ability to control things. Mm-hmm. But to kind of flip it into something positive, the thing gained is to approach, and I do this not just with my kids. I try to do it when things are, when I'm doing it the way I want to do it. I try to do it with everyone I encounter, whether it's people in my business life or wherever it might be, is to be mindful about what is important to me. And what is important to me is the relationship. Mm-hmm. The relationship is more important than whether somebody chooses to do X or Y, even if I think X would be better for them. The real kind of light bulb going on moment is to say, whether it's X or Y is way less important to me than me being in loving connection with this other individual.
And I think that took a lot of work, didn't it? I mean, you both had very high expectations on your children, I think academically and and all the things that you thought were going to be the best for them. I mean, I think this was really something. And
we should add that, no one can prove causation, right? But there's certainly a correlation between us, and by us I mean kind of our whole family unit figuring these things out, and myself and Tracy kind of stepping back and just focusing on connection and relationship rather than trying to force anything down any particular pathway. And now, ironically, after we gave up control, guess what? It's what you told us all these many years ago would happen, is that they are actually turning into hyperachievers.
Exactly.
So Kate is now, getting close to the end of the road. She's almost a veterinarian. Mm-hmm. And so she's at grad school in England working on that. And Alma has just been admitted to grad school in New Zealand to do her great life's love, which is Francophone literature. And it's just like, those are things, there is no way we could ever steer either one of them towards those things. And, we weren't like helicopter parents. We weren't highly controlling parents. The degree of control we were exercising because we were an extremist. We had kids that were nearly dying on us. And I think we needed to exercise a lot of control to keep them alive. But we kind of had, we've talked about this before, Leslie, we kind of got stuck in that mode, and PTSD was kind of keeping us from getting out of that mode. And that, to me, is the work that we've done, is we've come out of that mode and probably gone, further towards connection, not correction, than we ever were before. And I'm here to testify that it wasn't the goal, but happens to be that they're developing these wonderful achievements.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the beauty of we're a little bit farther out in this view of parenting now, so we're able to see. I think when I started working with you guys and started doing it myself, it was a little edgy, right? It's like, okay, because we all want an outcome, and it's like, okay, how are we going to get this outcome? And I was like, you're gonna have to let it go, right? We're just gonna have to, come together and trust that this is the piece right here, the connection, the relationship. And that's challenging, right?
Well, and then your worst case scenario there is still great, because then you will have really fed and nurtured loving connection with this other individual.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they end up doing with their life.
Right.
And you're always going to be glad of that.
Yeah. That's the heart good, doesn't it?
I want to say, in answer to your question, I feel I had to give up the illusion that I had control over how their lives were unfolding, either on a, moment by moment basis or in the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt if I, supported them to get into the right college or to get the right medical practitioner or to solve whatever the problem was in the moment, if I just came up with the right answer, that then I would be shaping how their life turned out. And I had the process of letting go of that it took a lot of unraveling, but also it opened me to a very soft and tender place rather than a feeling of rigid purpose and that I had this job to do as their mother. It opened me more to the soft place, the sometimes risky place, because they have continued to have some psychological or psychiatric struggles that have felt sometimes risky, and to be alongside them as they go through that rather than trying to steer them I just think of it as a softer place than the rigidness and that was cutting me off from what might happen in a moment that to me in the past might have seemed like a purely negative experience that I had to really work hard to get out of. Whatever quote, bad thing was happening, I had to really change that circumstance because it was so uncomfortable. And if I can instead be actually present with them, not trying to change them, that is where I have found surprising beauty and sweetness.
And it is a practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
I really want folks to know this, that I know you and Brian have really taken this on as a practice, as you say, a spiritual practice or whatever practice, because we have practiced the other way for a billion times, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's in our neural pathways, it's in our ideas, it's our habits. And to actually give yourself, as Brian said so beautifully, that pause, to actually know that if you connect with yourself first, if you connect with your own heart, if you connect with the own love of your own being, that something miraculous, as you said, Tracy, and you too, Brian, it's like I'm always shocked, miraculously, when I take that time to come back and love myself, then I'm able to attune to that outer environment without the need for it to change so that I'm okay. So I would love to speak just really quickly before we go today, since I get a couple on the line here. Maybe you could speak just a little bit about, what this did to your coupledom, your marriage, and how you've seen this shift. I mean, this is a lot of times people are like, well, we're not on the same page, or my husband feels this and my wife's this. And, it can be very, very challenging going through all of this. Yes?
Well, I think it was extraordinarily powerful for us to do the work with you together. We did that for 2 or 3 years, and that gave us a shared vocabulary that was new to us. I think we'd been married probably close to 30 years when we started working with you. And with that shared experience and new vocabulary, that really opened up things between us to be able to work out problems that happened between us. And it revealed, I think, we have very different styles about how we put this work into practice. And so I know for that what I experience when Brian is working on his safe seat, where he's going inward to take care of himself, I really struggle with, because he gets very quiet and kind of removes himself. And I struggle feeling abandoned, and I scramble often to try and get him back. So that's been an interesting awareness to have that's helped me recognize what goes on inside myself. Again, it's not that he's the problem, it's what's happening inside me that I'm stirred up about as he's doing whatever it is he's doing. So having the shared vocabulary has been fantastic to open some new ways of being a couple.
How about you, Brian?
I think that the pause has been very useful in our marriage relationship for me because it enables me to stop and say, I wonder what's really going on here. And to the extent I'm having feelings, of anger, frustration, or fear, or whatever, and I can go explore those. And it also gives me a moment of curiosity to say, well, I wonder where Tracy's coming from and why. And as I was saying, we have a saying in our family that it's not about the bike. And that came from you, Leslie, and that was when we haven't talked much about our youngest daughter, Jamie. And needless to say, when you have two significantly older sisters that are going through long, torturous health crises right there in front of you when you're just a little kid, that's pretty stressful. And that stress played out in a variety of ways, and one of them concerned a bike. And you reminded us that it wasn't about the bike. That she
never about what we think it's about, right?
Yeah. And so I've learned with Tracy and also, frankly, with everyone in my life, that if someone comes into my office or Tracy comes into the family room and she's ticked off about something, my instinct from when I was raised is to think, what did I do wrong? And I still have a long ways to go on working on this, but I've started to say, come on, let's just pause. Let's take a deep breath. There's a good chance that it has nothing to do with me. In fact, it's kind of egocentrical to think that, it's something I did. And that pause and the reaching for the curiosity, I have found can be very constructive when I do it. I don't claim to do it 100% of the time, but when I do it, it just kind of like lets the air out of the anger balloon in the room. If I just say, what's going on?
Yeah.
And with genuine curiosity. And that usually leads to a good conversation.
Well, as you're saying so beautifully, this is a practice because we can often feel emotionally threatened when there's no threat, as you just described, right?
Yeah.
Because often if you have that history of getting in trouble and you start to feel that, you're going to move back into that early time of feeling emotionally threatened. So, of course, you're going to get defensive or justify or whatever you did as a young child, which was really smart, right? So a lot of this work, as I try to tell people, is updating our strategies, updating into our adultness, which is what you just described. When I'm able to pause, I might be able to not make it all about me, and I might actually see that, thank you for coming to me. I always tell parents, it's like, I had a young woman the other day, and she said her son was just going on and on about she was the worst mother and she never been there for him and on and on and on. And I said, in that moment, when we're not taking it personally, can we say thank you for sharing your pain with me? Because isn't that what we all want, to be present with another human being as they find their way through their pain, right? And when we don't take it on personally, we can go, thank you. I know, Tracy, this is a big practice for you with your girls, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I hear
I'm getting
you.
better at that. Yeah.
You are. And so I just want to stress to everyone that this is, we're shifting our whole internal organization of how we've cared for ourselves. We're beginning to see that, maybe we're living in a different time. And that's what we really have to do, is update the young strategies that we all created that were so beautiful and were so in service to the vulnerable young parts of ourselves. So I would love to end today if either one of you just take a moment and see if there's any last words you would like to share with anyone that may be listening, because there might be a lot of mamas and papas here that might be struggling with, especially in the teen years and the young adult years, and starting to feel like maybe they're failures, maybe there's something that they didn't do right. Are there any words of wisdom that you would like to offer?
I think I would say...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, you. Go, Tracy.
I would, if I could speak to myself earlier in my parenting journey before I started working with you, I would say to be open to a paradigm shift that could transform your relationship with your child. Mm. And I resisted it because I really thought my child was the problem, and that I wasn't a problem, or that I didn't have anything to work on. And I resented being told that I had something that I might need to focus on. But as I moved through it, it's what transformed everything and opened the possibility of such a beautiful ongoing relationship that I have with my daughters now. They're in their 20s and the oldest one is 30. And it could have gone really differently. We could have really been cut off from each other in these years if I had not been open to that. So
that would have been really easy. In fact, I would say that would be the default mode. You know, when you have kids, no one gives you an instruction manual at all, but certainly no one gives you an instruction manual for the kinds of mental health crises that we were working with our kids. And it's really uncharted territory. And also, as manifested by this conversation, if you lined up 1,000 mental health professionals and laid out all the details of the stuff that we went through with our daughters, you would get a million different opinions on how to manage it. Yeah. and how to try to live through that intact. So the kind of the big revelation that I came to in the process was, you're the first counselor I've worked with, Leslie, that has ever expressly incorporated the concept of love into the paradigm. Because I guess at a lot of places where they study such things, they're sternly warned against doing anything that mushy. And to me, it's transformative because once that's your premise, you kind of can't lose. If you are just saying, I'm gonna love this individual, and I'm going to love myself enough to get to where I can love this individual, then the ability of all the other stuff in life to wound me is greatly diminished. And that's good for me, and it's good for my kids, and it's good for my wife, and it's good for the people I work with, and so forth and so on.
And the world, huh? Let's take it to the planet. Well, how beautiful. I'm so touched by both of your expression to yourselves and to your children and to the world. And such deep, I bow down to you, deep appreciation. I know you have worked your tushies off on this and continue. I like to tell people this is a lifelong journey. It's not all of a sudden you get the steps and then you've got them and life is, like, oh, the fantasy is that we're all perfect and we're good. This is the power of love. Yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you, my loves. I so deeply appreciate you being here. And mwah.
Thank you, Leslie.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
This week, I'd like to thank Tracy and Brian for taking the time to share with me their profound journey on their road of parenting. Parenting Pause is produced by Kim Paletti at Sound Mind Productions. Music by Jan Perchik. You can find the show notes at www.purejoyparenting.com, where you'll get access to the foundational practice of Pure Joy, the safe seat, and find links to relevant topics, as well as a transcription of the show. And if this work inspires you and you would like to practice, come join us in my free Pure Joy Parenting Practice group. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for being here today and listening to the Parenting Pause podcast, your partner and support in finding the joy in yourself and with your children. And remember, if you're about to scream, pause.